leave it all behind you. I said, take down everything that stands in your way. Don't stop believing it'll work out again, my friend. Stand out and be a part of everything good. Wake up, you're gonna be all that you should. Try out all the things you've always wanted to be. You'll see, 'cause I know what I know, that you've got it in you, and I see that you are a winner.
Did historical Jesus really exist? The evidence just doesn't add up. Article by Raphael Laddister. It says there are clearly good reasons to doubt Jesus's historical existence. Now, I fully intend to read this article aloud into this video, and I know that there have been a few people who have expressed outrage about being read to. So I'm going to put the link to the video into the body of, well, the description part of this. So if you're one of those people that just are extremely offended by the whole being read to thing, you outgrew it, you don't need to have it, especially since I do not do the best job of reading these things, you can just go to the link and read it yourself and stop listening to the video at this point, and thus save yourself from all the anxiety and upset feelings that you might otherwise experience being read to, okay? So just, all right. I'm going to read the article now. I'm going to give you a little bit of a pause here to give you time to reach to, you know, control the little whatever, the mouse on your computer, to click the stop playing button so you don't have to continue to listen and thus be offended. I'm going to wait for a minute because some people are slower to find the mouse on their computers than other people. Yeah, the older I get, the more I appreciate people like that, because I'm one of them. You know, the whole technology thing is, it really does get a little bit harder as you get older to keep up. It actually annoys the hell out of me a lot of the times, dealing with... Anyway, I don't want to digress too much there. I'm going to read the article now. Yes. I hope the people who would have been offended are no longer listening. Did a man called Jesus of Nazareth walk the earth? Discussions over whether the figure known as the historical Jesus actually existed primarily reflect disagreements among atheists. Believers who uphold the implausible and more easily dismissed Christ of faith, parentheses, the divine Jesus who walked on water, ought not to get involved. Numerous secular scholars have presented their own versions of the so-called historical Jesus, and most of them are, as biblical scholar J.D. Crossan puts it, an academic embarrassment. From Crossan's view of Jesus as the wise sage to Robert Eisman's Jesus the revolutionary and Bart Ehrman's apocalyptic prophet, about the only thing New Testament scholars seem to agree on is Jesus' historical existence. But can even that be questioned? The first problem we encounter when trying to discover more about the historical Jesus is the lack of early sources. The earliest source only reference the clearly fictional Christ of faith. These early sources, compiled decades after the alleged events, all stem from Christian authors eager to promote Christianity, which gives us reason to question them. The authors of the Gospels fail to name themselves, describe their qualifications, or show any criticism with their foundational sources, which they also fail to identify. Filled with mythical and non-historical information and heavily edited over time, the Gospel certainly should not convince critics to trust even the more mundane claims made therein. The methods traditionally used to tease out rare nuggets of truth from the Gospels are dubious. The criterion of embarrassment says that if a section would be embarrassing for the author, it is more likely authentic. Unfortunately, given the diverse nature of Christianity and Judaism back then, parentheses, things have not changed all that much, and the anonymity of the authors, it is impossible to determine what truly would be embarrassing or counterintuitive, let alone if that might not serve some evangelistic purpose. The criterion of Aramaic context is similarly unhelpful. Jesus and his closest followers were surely not the only Aramaic speakers in first century Judea. The criterion of multiple independent attestation can also hardly be used properly here, given that the sources clearly are not independent. Paul's epistles, written earlier than the Gospels, give us no reason to dogmatically declare Jesus must have existed. Avoiding Jesus' earthly events and teachings, even when the latter could have bolstered his own claims, Paul only describes his heavenly Jesus. Even when discussing what appear to be the resurrection and the Last Supper, his only stated sources are his direct revelations from the Lord and his indirect revelations from the Old Testament. In fact, Paul actually rules out human sources. See Galatians 1:11 through 12. Also important are the sources we don't have. There are no existing eyewitnesses or contemporary accounts of Jesus. All we have are later descriptions of Jesus' life events by non-eyewitnesses, most of whom are obviously biased. Little can be gleaned from the few non-biblical and non-Christian sources, with only Roman scholar Josephus and historian Tacitus having any reasonable claim to be writing about Jesus within 100 years of his life. And even those sparse accounts are shrouded in controversy, with disagreements over what parts have obviously been changed by Christian scribes. Parentheses, the manuscripts were preserved by Christians. The fact that both these authors were born after Jesus died, parentheses, they would thus have probably received this information from Christians, and the oddity that centuries go by before Christian apologists start referencing them. Agnosticism over the matter is already seemingly appropriate, and support for this position comes from independent historian Richard Carrier's recent defense of another theory, namely that the belief in Jesus started as the belief in purely celestial being, who was killed by demons in an upper realm, who became historicized over time. To summarize Carrier's 800-page tome, this theory and the traditional theory that Jesus was a historical figure who became mythicized over time both align well with the Gospels, which are later mixtures of obvious myth and what at least sounds historical. The Pauline epistles, however, overwhelmingly support the celestial Jesus theory, particularly with the passage indicating that demons killed Jesus and would not have done so if they knew who he was. See 1 Corinthians 2, verse 6 through 10. Humans, the murderers, according to the Gospels, of course, would still have killed Jesus, knowing full well that his death results in their salvation and the defeat of evil spirits. So what do the mainstream, parentheses, and non-Christian scholars say about all this? Surprisingly very little, of substance anyway. Only Bart Ehrman and Maurice Casey have thoroughly attempted to prove Jesus' historical existence in recent times. Their most decisive point? The Gospels can generally be trusted after we ignore the many, many bits that are untrustworthy because of the hypothetical, parentheses, i.e. non-existent, sources behind them. Who produced these hypothetical sources? When? What did they say? Were they reliable? Were they intended to be accurate historical portrayals, enlightening allegories, or entertaining fictions? Ehrman and Casey can't tell you, and neither can any New Testament scholar. Given the poor state of the existing sources and the atrocious methods used by mainstream biblical historians, the matter will likely never be resolved. In sum, there are clearly good reasons to doubt Jesus' historical existence, if not to think it outright improbable.